Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald! Around the body. Jazz up!
He's off from inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal from inside the centre. Fuck! I can't believe it.
Good time of day. Welcome to Americans Watching the Footy, episode 225. This is part 3 of 3 of our home and away previews, except we're not going to be watching the footy quite as soon as we would have hoped. I know this kind of goes out of order with all the preview stuff, but I guess it's worth mentioning that officially now 2 of the opening round games have been postponed, with Tropical Cyclone, or as we call it in America, Hurricane Alfred, coming in. This does look to be the right decision. I'm just disappointed for 2 reasons. One, I'm actually free this Friday, and now there's no Saturday game, aka Friday night here. 2, now I'm actually really not going to get to watch like Geelong's first real game in full live, because I'm going to be at the state basketball championships, and that round 1 game against Frio bounces really early, like 7:20 p.m. here, so that sucks for me. But as much as I would have enjoyed another rainy win at the GABA, where only Tyson Stengel can do anything, I understand. That game goes to round 3, most likely. Gold Coast and Essendon could have some interesting fixture juggling moving ahead, because they don't have the same bye round. And now that I've done all this talking, here's some other guy.
That's Ethan. I'm Benjamin. Hello. Yeah, this is why I'm glad actually that we're recording tonight rather than before, because otherwise everything would just seem really out of date and awkward, and now we could talk about things in the proper time frames. I think it's going to have to be some sort of mid-season switch around, maybe one team losing their bye altogether, if not both. The only way you have this remedy early is like a triple switch or so involving games with South Australian teams.
There's talk about possibly, throw a game into a Tuesday or Thursday, and then instead of a team having a bye, just having, like a couple extra days off, some midweek stuff. My proposal is whatever allows there to be more games when I'm going to be there sometime in July/August.
Have fun.
Most likely somewhere in July. I don't know about like full details yet.
You'll be doing that while I'll be either moving or setting up a classroom. Nerd! It is pretty amazing that in our small footy circle that we're in here in America, and I'm thinking of our fantasy league, that there are going to be 3 teachers once I get full time.
It's especially funny because, like teaching and footy really don't line up on like similar clock times.
The footy and teaching crossover I'm thinking of is Tom Edwards.
It's just my point is it's kind of funny.
It's a little bit funny
because teaching is an early morning thing. So the only way for it to work a lot of times, I guess if you're on the East Coast and you've got like the Thursday and Friday night games and then go straight into work, but otherwise it's tough.
Yeah. Craig from Yank on the Footy talks about that. He's able to, once both the US and Australia change time, do some sunrise footy watching before his first period begins. For me, though, I'm just going to have to crash right when I get home if I'm going to keep watching as many games live as I've been. The answer will probably be no, I'll just be watching more on delay. But that's a problem for future Benjamin. Near future Benjamin, but future. Remember, we got this whole multiverse of Benjamins going with recording Benjamin, editing Benjamin, posting Benjamin, future teaching Benjamin.
How many Benjamins is that?
At least 4, and who knows how many more.
That's at least 5 more than there should be.
Accidents happen.
So we got 6 teams left to preview.
Across 4 states.
And I guess there's a little bit tied into the fixture change stuff, kind of. But yeah, let's do some wheel spinning and analyzing and predicting. And
as they say in footy, let's do that footy. And we will start with Melbourne, who opened 2024 in Sydney.
The more I look at this team, the less positive my outlook is. You know, last year was not fun for this team, especially once Christian Petrarca went down. Then you take away one of the guys who really broke out last year, and Alex Neil-Boland.
Would you call it a breakout?
Yeah, I mean, he was solid before, but he elevated his game.
I mean, out of necessity, because he wasn't able to be that supporting guy anymore, and he's excellent in that. Career high numbers in a lot of respect for him at age 28, and then he went home, and Melbourne lost that trade.
Unless Harvey Langford or Xavier Lindsay, their 2 high picks, can start to break out, I just don't see a lot of areas where this thing can be better. I mean, a more efficient Jack Viney would go a long way.
And just healthy Petrarca and Oliver, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself.
You know, maybe Trent Rivers really cements himself as like a really solid player, but just like, I don't know how high the ceiling is outside of like, it's high in the midfield because Petrarca and Oliver. But it's just like, where else is the room for this to be like a legitimately really good team?
A lot of it's the same pieces that have been there and have stuck around from the Premiership team. They're not getting younger in defense, that's for sure. Stephen May looked very in control of things in that All-Stars game and is still the commander of that back unit for them. I'll trust that tandem with him and Jake Lever, while also knowing that at least one of them will miss a few games this year. Honestly, halfback is where I'm more discouraged, mostly because of the injuries that have come along. It's one spot where you were looking at the younger side and were somewhat positive. Now, Judd McVie will be missing the first couple rounds with his hamstring, and Andy Mudda's Wakefield, his knee is fucked.
It's like the entire knee.
Almost all the CLs. This is like as bad as Robert Griffin III's knee.
While I'm not positive about this team, if you look through the list, you could convince me that the forward group has what it takes. If you get some consistency out of Fritsch and Kazi, you know, a healthy Cade Chandler will be nice.
How about a healthy Jacob Van Rooyen? He was taken out early mostly as a precaution after getting a knock in the preseason game against Freo. Despite losing Van Rooyen in that game, they still had a really high rate of inside 50s that led to scores. It's just those scores were largely behinds.
You get a point just for having a crack.
I don't know how much stock you could take, though, out of a preseason game against that vanilla Dockers unit.
I don't put a lot of stock into set shot accuracy in preseason, especially if it's a game at a smaller oval where wind makes more of an impact.
And that's definitely how it was in Mandurah.
I mean, you'd like to see, you know, for the, you know, if it's someone who hasn't had good kicking to kick better, but really not the biggest deal.
Found a stats that I was looking for. Melbourne had the 3rd best inside 50 to score ratio for the preseason weekend at 56%, which is damn high. And they were still generating shots without Jacob Van Rooyen or Kazi Pickett forward. So if there's hope, it's there. Otherwise, I don't think where the hope is anything new. It's more established quantities aside from Langford and Lindsay. And then in terms of guys who could take that bump up for the second year, I mean, remember they did miss Caleb Windsor at the end of last year after he did his hamstring. And Colton Dolstrup's been dealing with some hand issues in the preseason.
I made him my not very inspired breakout pick just because, you know, it's like he's at the right age and didn't show a ton last year. You know, there were moments, but this was kind of like I got to pick somebody. And I'm not trying to sound so negative about this team. Like maybe within the first month of the season, they look a whole lot better, show that last year was an aberration, and start to see reason to be optimistic again. But I just, you know, this team got to a point last year where it was like, we have to watch this again. And I'm still just kind of feeling that carryover.
Again, how much of that was from the players that they were missing? Because at the time it was all of Petrarca, Oliver, and May, I believe. And this time Oliver's got a full preseason in this year.
It was a mix of that and the style they play. Oh, I do have one piece of Melbourne-related news that maybe you haven't even heard about yet.
Go on.
Ben Brown has been named the head of player development on the Essendon AFLW side.
Did see that. Actually allows him to be there full time because I know there was a limit with how many hours he was able to get at Melbourne. Just watch within the next 5 or 6 years, he could be a head coach at either Melbourne or North.
The most woke head coach ever.
He's the hero AFLW needs.
I want, though, if we're going to have a super woke coach, we also need like a very stand for the flag, kneel for the cross coach.
Does he have to be like super hypocritical at everything, though, where he talks like that and then he's actually Hugh Freeze?
No, just has to counterbalance it.
Or, no. How about somebody else who was at Auburn? Senator Tuberville.
Tommy Tuberville becoming Ted Lasso would be outstanding because he's like the least likely person to do it, too.
Well, the most likely one's been dead for a couple of years now, sadly.
Yeah.
If you don't recall, the answer is Mike Leach. Long live the pirate. My sleeper pick for Melbourne is someone who has had a couple sub cameos, really impressed in that short time, and has had no reward for it. And that is Kynan Brown. Still yet to make an appearance in the 22, or maybe even play more than a quarter. The son of Nathan Brown, not the one who's been doing the betting ads, the one who played for Melbourne. I remember just in his very first moments on the oval, he got this crunching, holding the ball tackle, and Dad was stone-faced while Adam Uze was living it up next to him.
A couple of things looking at their list that entertain me.
Let's not forget that they do have a trade acquisition this year in Harry Sharp from Brisbane, looking for opportunities in the 22. He should get that pretty quickly, injuries or not. They did also bring in Tom Campbell for ruck support. So sorry to the other Tom there, the former basketballer. And congratulations also to Jai Cully for gaining that supplemental spot along with Jack Henderson. It's unfortunate that it came after Shane McAdam did his Achilles, but Jai Cully's got a lifeline. So another guy with dreads back on an AFL list.
So two things looking at their list, and they're actually right next to each other. One, I love that Ed Langdon's photo has him in long sleeves. Two, maybe Jack Billings becomes playable again, because that was a disaster last year.
Well, he didn't impress in the preseason, so take what you want out of that.
I mean, maybe, put this in like it can't get worse, can it?
The Charlie Spargo can have other forward solutions. I'm thinking about talls other than Van Rooyen and the given that is Max gone. It seems like Harrison Petty in the back, Daniel Turner forward is the move, and I approve.
Well, I liked Petty last year as like that contested mark guy, like in that one really good game he had against Geelong.
Well, that was one really good game. And with Tom McDonald aging out, I mean, you can have Petty be that rover sort of, but I'd rather start him in the back. I like what I saw later in the year from Turner. And you also got Matt Jefferson to try at AFL level because he didn't get a game last year and has yet to at all. Despite putting up some decent performances in the VFL, he's kicked 52 goals in 37 VFL games for Casey. I know they have liked to take their time developing their keys. I mean, they had Jacob Van Rooyen spend a full year in the twos before he got his chance. So maybe they know something long-term with Jefferson, but gotta see it this year, I think. I also have the feeling that this year has to be the year for things to happen. Either there's a run this year that convinces me, or we already know that Kazi's gone. Who the hell else could go with him? And Simon Goodwin could be coaching the Crows.
So here's my frustration, the more I think about it, and it helps that I see Angels baseball in the background. Melbourne has done the hard part. You've got the elite midfielder in Petrarca. You've got the elite ruckman in Gone. Building around that should not be a challenge. The challenge should be finding a Petrarca and a Gone.
And you've got a 21-year-old forward who scored 30 goals last year. You've got some other accurate shots. Fritsch had 41. I mean, the top level seems to largely be there with some questions in defense, particularly halfback right now. It's the depth that leaves me curious because, I mean, Jake Melksham at this point is probably going to be on his last legs. Tajwa Woden was a perma sub, and I don't like that ever.
Yeah, I was going to talk about how they handle their substitute stuff, but unless you're, like absolutely exceptional in that role and super versatile, I don't like the perma sub.
Well, the guy who was very good at that and was super versatile in 2023, I want to say, he ain't coming back.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
How quickly we've forgotten about Joel Smith.
I wasn't even thinking about him. I was thinking about when Toby Bedford was in that role, and I guess that was a year earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing that the AFL has managed to essentially bury the whole
Joel Smith story by banning him for 4 years and saying fuck off.
by just going totally silent on it. And everyone just yeah, if we don't talk about it, everyone will forget about it. And then they just kind of dropped it in, and it actually kind of worked.
Looking back at my sleeper, Kynan Brown did not play in that community series game. It just seems way too obvious that he didn't. Look for Jed Adams to make a debut quickly as a defender. And otherwise, maybe Aiden Johnson gets an opportunity as well as another key guy. Was surprised to not see Jefferson in there. But yeah, that next level has to take that next step. Blake Howes was middling for much of last year. I see him as versatile. He's got to prove his worth this year and quickly. I mean, this is a guy that slotted in fullback right away, had some wing time, but was also very forgettable. That's the type of guy I'm looking for. Their double ups, by the way, are Collingwood, Gold Coast, Hawthorn, North, Saints, and Eagles. Some eminently winnable stuff there, and they've got one of the longer streaks of the AFL against the Suns. So it's a very forgiving schedule. A lot of my metrics have it as the second easiest based on last year. So game on, D's.
Yeah, let's see here. I forgot to look through and find, that stretch is really tough. All right, rounds 9 through 11, Hawthorn at Brisbane, Sydney. Then you go out to Alice Springs. Then you have Collingwood and at Port, and then you get into the bye. And then out of the bye, as of now, this could be subject to change, but at Gold Coast, at Adelaide. And then the final 3, Dogs, Hawks, Pies, although those are all at the G. Also, let's note, they actually have a home game in Marvel for once.
That would be against the Eagles in round 21, and I wholeheartedly approve. Think about what a regular G10 did last time they had to host the Eagles at Marvel.
Collingwood beat them there last year.
That wasn't as much of a shock as it had happened before. I'm thinking still 2022.
Okay, but Collingwood beat them there last year.
Fair. If Melbourne enter that stretch starting round 9, even the 500 is just going to feel so over for them already, I think, looking at this schedule. And those final 3 rounds could be such a morale killer that, yeah, I can totally see Simon Goodwin gone and potentially coaching the Crows next year.
Okay, with those double ups, only one team that made the 8, but then outside of that, Collingwood, who they almost always have twice, Gold Coast, which means, yay, you get to face the Suns at home, but boo, you have to face the Suns up there. That's usually a guaranteed split, although, again, they have dominated the Suns. West Coast twice, Ricky, because there is a trip to West Coast.
And the weirdness of Ross ball.
Yeah, the path for this team to be successful is go win some out-of-state games, and we could be talking about something actually pretty decent.
That is team number
13!
done in our previews. I milk that soundbite for whatever it is worth. I just realized Melbourne still don't double up against Geelong, do they?
No, they come to Geelong early, and that's about it. The round 4, that is the Friday night game. Let's see, other than that, Anzac Eve game and the Geelong game, I don't see any other early season really Thursday or Friday games for these guys, which tells you how the outlook and profile of the club has changed.
You're not special anymore, folks. I was talking about Geelong because that's who was spun on the wheel next. And since 2019, they've only doubled up once with Melbourne. And that was the year they actually had to play him 3 times, of course.
That did not go well.
No, Melbourne swept that. But it's time for the cat attack.
All right. I don't know if we're quite off-season champions, but definitely one of the best off-seasons with bringing in Bailey Smith and not having to give up all that much out of it.
The Dogs held up the whole trade period and got nearly everything they needed done in one fell swoop. And I believe the price for Geelong to pay was Fetty Wap.
Now, my big questions for this team coming into this year, off of finishing, what was it, third last year, making a prelim, nearly winning that prelim. I'm not enthused with like some of the ways guys were deployed during the community series, and I'm a little concerned about that. Injuries are mild so far. Tanner Bruin would have been out for opening round, and now that that's been postponed, I don't know what his status is. Bailey Smith had some concerns, but those concerns are a lot smaller for round one than they would have been for opening round. But like if you looked at the community series, you had Tom Stewart playing in the midfield a bunch, which like you have Bailey Smith now. This seems a lot less necessary, and you can return him to being like an elite defender who maybe you throw into the middle, like if you really needed to push things offensively. And then Sam DeConing at Ruck didn't love. He picked it up quickly last year, and with Toby Conway out and Reece Stanley towards the end, it's kind of funky. Like there are a bunch of options there, none of which really fire me up, but all of which have shown competence. Yeah, the biggest thing is just I'd like to see Tom Stewart back in the defense, because the defense is a bit of a concern, which was a concern at times last year.
Do you think that Stewart's deployment was partially because of Bruin's absence?
I don't think you do that for the community series. What I did like, and I'm going to jump right into this, he would have been my breakout pick for this year had I not already used him a couple of years ago, who looked really good on clearances and stuff, was Mitch Nevitt. And I also didn't hate the look of Patrick Dangerfield at forward. I think that's something that, you can try throughout the year to preserve his legs.
I was surprised by Chris Goff's call of that, and yeah, my thinking is that's something you're doing to not tax him, make sure that he has the legs underneath him for the full season, because we're too used to him doing his hamstring.
And the earlier part of the schedule is not super forgiving. Like, I love the availability of small forwards with Brad Close and Brian Myers, who has become so well established that he wasn't just like a late vanity pick for me in our fantasy draft. He got taken, I think, 8th round. I didn't even get him. I'm much more optimistic about the way Geelong is kind of bridging the generations than Collingwood, which I think is the one you kind of have to compare it to. Because you look at Collingwood, there's the super old, a big gap in the super young. And then you look at Geelong, and it's becoming like a pretty graceful transition. Like, I'm so high on Lawson Humphreys. Connor O'Sullivan's my breakout pick for this year, and I'm going to be banging the drum for him to be in the main 22 like all year long. I think he looks really competent, and they even threw him forward a couple times during the preseason, and he looked good doing that.
Versatility was a selling point for him in his draft year. This is a guy who played up in the Ovens and Murray League a few times near the end of 2023, including in that grand final up against a fair number of former VFL and AFL players.
It's pretty cool to see, even though he's still on the younger side in a lot of respects, that Brian is part of kind of bridging the gap there.
I think Bailey Smith is bridging the gap at this point.
I think so. I think Max Holmes is still on the younger side, but he's really well established.
All Australian this year, you got to call it?
I don't know. He might take a slight step back from last year. I think like you're in a position now with the reinforcements where you can afford a slight step back from him. Because remember, it was his first half of the season that was so good. And, Ollie Dempsey, who was one of the few like really quiet pieces in the preseason. Tell you who I was surprisingly pleased with in the preseason was Jake Kolajashny, like as a ball mover. He looked just like totally re-energized. Instead of just, as a shut down an opposing team's small forward, he played with a lot of energy that I really wasn't expecting. And that has me encouraged for what he can bring to the table this year.
What I saw in the preseason game just made me think that he turned back the clock a couple of years. We know that he can move the ball for the occasional butt tattoo update, but he had been cast as more of the shutdown guy. And if you think about what worked in 2022, the premiership year, it was him and Buse being those necessary pieces on defense. Now at this point, you're casting him and maybe O'Sullivan, maybe Zach Guthrie into more of that role. I assume you're going to talk about Zach Guthrie because he's one of your men.
Yeah, we're now at a point with the development of Zach Guthrie and Lawson Humphreys that like Mitch Duncan's impact on this team went from essential to anything you get out of him in his twilight years, I think this is his final season. Anything you get out of him would be a nice little bonus, but you're not like reliant on it. You can play him sparingly. You can rest him a lot. Guthrie, it's amazing. Unfortunately, he's the only Guthrie we've seen much of. Cam Guthrie had more issues. This time, minor Achilles surgery. I think it was just to clean up like some loose bodies in there. So not like, ligament had to be fully repaired, but surgery nonetheless.
How close do you think the best 22 did you see during that community series match? I think that's
somewhat. I just, Bailey Smith's a significant one. Tanner Bruin's significant. Sean Mana's significant.
And realized that Mana had been missing. And I mean, he'd had his ups and downs last year, but Mana just fits the mold of Geelong so well in terms of just those mature finds. And he was my focus pick last year just because it felt way too obvious. And yeah, it was. I mean, if I look back at like one of my favorite non-finals games that Geelong played, which was round 23 at Fremantle, those were moments just like, oh, yep, that's the kind of stuff I knew Sean was going to do. It feels like at this point, the quantities are known for Geelong, even the guys that they're bringing in. The guy that I'm most curious about in the midfield at this point, and one who I don't think gets talked about enough, is Jack Bowes. With Bailey Smith in there, crowding the ranks more, what do you see Bowes' role being?
Well, my opinion on Bowes for a while has been that he's good against lesser competition and, hasn't really shown up against the best.
Oh, so he's a Pittsburgh Steeler.
I mean, you could, in theory, call him a flat track bully, but I'm not quite labeling him as that. I'm just labeling him as decent, and it would be tough to ask him to go match up with the best of the best. And now that you have Bailey Smith, that means he gets an easier matchup and can really feast. And I think that's a great fit.
Would you reliably select Jack Bowes over a Nevitt or a Jai Clark?
At the moment, definitely over Clark, who didn't quite take the step last year that I was hoping he would. Nevitt, I really liked what I saw just in terms of clearances and stuff. I'm wondering, I know he's kind of in a super valuable veteran role to the team, but like if Nevitt kind of ends up edging out like Tom Atkins.
Be a story to me, but with that similar sort of aggression and I think a bit more punch in terms of forward ability, it's not entirely far-fetched either.
The other nice thing about this, asking about the best 22 is like, you could ask a whole lot of different people what the best 22 is, and you could come up with a lot of different answers because there's probably 28 to 30 candidates, which is what you want. So what are the concerns? I mean, I feel decently confident in Shannon Neal. I mean, he's not Tom Hawkins. He's not going to be as good of a set shot, but I like his mobility, especially for someone his size. And I think he will do some of the forward ruck work. So I wouldn't even count that as a concern. I'm more concerned about, key defenders, especially depending on the role they put Stewart in. Like, what is Sam DeConing at this point? Is he a ruckman? Is he a key defender? Where's his confidence? Because it all does seem to just be a confidence and body language thing with him.
Aren't we going to find out that answer while Mark Blitzovs is still a Cap?
I don't know. I love Mark Blitzovs. I'm glad we still have him.
Blitzovs, I feel like, is the piece that will answer our questions about DeConing just by where we see Blitzovs. Because he's so versatile, because he's the perfect interchange All-Australian, he'll be filling in the gaps where I think DeConing might otherwise be, except against like a particularly terrifying midfield where he could end up on ball. So I wouldn't be shocked to see a greater defensive split for Blitzovs if DeConing is being cast as that number one ruck, which, by the way, I don't want. I would much rather have Blitzovs in there. But Chris Scott seems to have other ideas.
Other questions? Yeah. Especially with Toby Conway once again hurt. This time a disc in his back. It's like, what is the ruck situation? Reece Stanley looked washed and then all of a sudden looked all right at the end of the year. I would love if Conway could be healthy enough that he could be playing like 18-ish games this year, but I'm not counting him for that until he can actually prove it. Right now, there's a lot of options that look competent, but none that make you say, wow. And then the other thing, going back to the defense, what do we get out of Jack Henry? Because we've seen very good and very bad. He was on my shit list a lot last year. He was great in that win at Freo. And the other question that I still have is, what do we do with a tagger this year? Mark O'Connor really fell down the hierarchy last year.
I don't think we saw him past like round 16 or so. Is that where Nevitt finds his niche?
Maybe. I think we'll find out pretty early just with like, how do you handle Caleb Sarong round 1? I like, by the way, I was just thinking about this, how teams have kind of deployed forward tags on Tom Stewart. I would like to see, if you need to tag and annoy an opposing defender, I think the obvious guy to employ in that role would actually be Sean Manna when healthy.
Manna doing sort of like the Will Hayward job. I dig that. I was going to mention Will Hayward at some point this episode, so there's Hayward for the first time. Geelong's double-ups this year are befitting a prelim finalist and a perennial contender. You've got 3 top sixers from last year in the Lions, Giants, and Power. Essendon, because that's pretty normal. The Saints, who the hell knows with them.
Saints have been a pretty regular double.
And Richmond gets to come down the highway again.
Yes, Essendon also coming down the highway. We talked before, but a while back, that there's only one home game at the G, and that is Easter Monday. So Collingwood and Carlton are both away games. The country game is Essendon's home game, and then Essendon gets to come down the highway again. I appreciate having 10 actual home games at Cardinia. I'm assuming this will be like an every other year thing. Some years it's 9, some years it's 10 based on the opponent rotation, but I'm not complaining. What I am concerned about is home form against GWS and Freo has been poopy butt pants. The Saints always feel like a guaranteed split. Maybe it helps that this time the first meeting is the away meeting because the Saints haven't done much down the highway. Once again, only playing the Swans away. That's annoying. That's round 23. We beat their faces in so badly the last time they came to Geelong that they're just not coming back. Looking through the schedule for the that really doesn't look fun stretch, I think playing the Crows away during Gather Round takes away a bit of the bite there. I'm a little disappointed, by the way, that is technically a neutral game instead of a true away game, because beating the Crows on the road last year on that early Friday night was super fun. And, having their whole light show and stuff. And instead, we'll just get the neutral playlist.
A very eclectic sort of playlist as well. The benefit of having that schedule being the way it is, by the way, I hate the schedule, by the way. I think Geelong should have been playing in the finale of Gather Round in some way, because they end up getting basically a short bye out of this, going from Thursday the 10th to Monday the 21st before they have to play again on Easter Monday. I mean, honestly, now it almost seems fitting knowing that they're losing their opening round makeup bye thing.
Now, with the round 4 game, so Brisbane will be round 3. Round 4 is a Friday at home. There's only 2 games scheduled for Sunday of round 3, but with the Cats having the Friday, I don't know if that'll end up being like the midday Sunday game or what they'll do with that. Stretches of schedule that do not look fun. Round 5 through 12 at Adelaide, but again, that is a bit less of a home advantage for Adelaide being part of Gather Round than Easter Monday. Anzac round against the Blues, Collingwood, GWS at home, which has not been fun in recent years, at Port, Thursday nighter at home against the Dogs, at West Coast.
You're putting at West Coast in that stretch simply because it is a Western road trip.
Yes.
Closing stretch doesn't look as bad. You've got 4 home games in 6 weeks out of the bye, with the away trips being the Giants and North, and that's the North Centennial game, so do watch out for that. They do go away to Sydney, but close against Richmond, so another typical soft landing for the Cats to potentially buff up their percentage if needed.
I can't remember who the hell would round 24 this year.
Last year was the Eagles.
Again, okay, so that's like 2 and 3, it's been the Eagles, okay.
It's typical to see a soft landing. I don't expect Geelong to be up for elimination in week 1 because it just hasn't happened in a hot minute. Believe it when I say it.
Things that are funky, actually playing North at Marvel instead of in Tasmania for the first time in a minute.
That's that Tenniel game.
Yeah. Don't love doubling up with GWS, but other than that, yeah, I think the second half of the schedule is a lot friendlier So it makes like player management really fascinating. Whereas, I like to get off to a hot start, be able to manage guys, and then get into the tougher games, So I'm curious what like behind the scenes they have. I'm sure there's, like a whole list or spreadsheet of, planning on resting guys, X amount of games between this round and how that's all going to shape out.
It's like me with my fantasy bye orientation. Do you remember this year? The buys are spread out over the middle of the season now in 5 rounds, 12 through 16. And Geelong's bye is round
16.
As of now, of course, some of that can maybe shift with the Gold Coast Essendon rearranging. I'm going to rearrange the wheel because it's time to spin again.
By the way, Brian Harambe is running around going nuts.
That's our executive producer.
He's taking his little cool down on the bed right now, but he'll be back at it shortly, I'm sure.
Well, the cat attack has struggled against the Giants, as we've said, particularly at Cardinia Park. And the Giants are up next, number 15 out of 18 for us. They're a side that has definitely gotten younger in a lot of respects. You look at some of the guys they lost in terms of Isaac Cumming and Nick Haynes. Yes, you have that addition of Jake Stringer, but the package isn't starting the season. He did his hamstring. And Jesse Hogan had a baseball level injury, I'll just say. Do you know about this, Ethan?
Yeah, he closed a door on his hand.
He broke his thumb jamming it in a door, per Mitch Cleary, which goes on the level of dumb, unintentional injuries. Like, he wasn't punching a wall out of frustration like, Drew Pomeranz or Hunter Strickland. But it makes me think of pitcher Adam Eaton, not the White Sox outfielder, the pitcher from the turn of the millennium, accidentally stabbing himself in the stomach while trying to knife open a DVD case. The movies, by the way, were Happy Gilmore and Backdraft.
Looking at the early season GWS injury list, I am disappointed that the Cats don't get them until round 9, because it's quite the list.
You also got Tom Green with his calf. He'll miss the first little bit. No Ryan Angwin, who could be an outside accelerator. Callum Brown is a forward and is mending his hamstring. And, of course, there are 5 players ranging from, they'd probably be in the 22 to, I don't think so at this point, who are suspended from the Mad Monday antics. The one who played most reliably would be Jake Riccardi, who has done very nice things as an additional forward target and ruck option in the past couple years. I think that really took off against Geelong in 2023. So more weight on Aaron Cadman early, definitely. I mean, between that and, Hogan being out, Cadman's probably going to draw those top matchups now. Maybe it's an opportunity also for Max Grzewski, or however his name is pronounced, to get some decent early season opportunities. This is going to be a very different forward look for the start of the season for the Giants. And that was going to be the case even before Hogan was out. Damn, I didn't realize just how banged up they were there. Harvey Thomas was a small forward option. We won't see him yet. Toby McMullen had been in there, sometimes as a sub. Joe Fonte was one of the more reliable movers for them, halfback and outside last year, and he's also suspended for the first 3 games, and I was really keen on watching the start of his campaign. So it could be a slower start for the Giants for all of them, and who will they be missing those guys against? Collingwood, Melbourne, and Hawthorn. Those Hawthorn games have usually been thrillers. I remember the insanity, particularly in a downfield call last year in Launceston early in the season, and that's where that'll be round 3.
Looking through this is going to be a bitch part of the schedule. Now, they have a round 2 bye. With the exception of Richmond, rounds 6 through 14 could be pretty tough. So after they have another game in Adelaide against the Crows, then Anzac round, they host the Dogs in Canberra.
Why can they not get that matchup at the showground, damn it?
Wasn't it last year?
Keep it there. You want to actually draw crowds to Western Sydney? Put that rivalry there. Yes, keep Anzac Day in Canberra, that Anzac night game, or I guess it's going to be Anzac Saturday this time. But try a different opponent. I mean, it worked really well with the Lions last year. That was the debut of Darcy Jones and his helmet, and it almost caused Chris Fagan to step back.
So round 8 at Sydney, round 9 at Geelong. Yes, that's gone well for them, but still difficult on paper. Freo round 10, at Carlton round 11, free win against Richmond round 12, then back to Canberra for Port, and then at Brisbane. So that is a difficult stretch. I'd say other than that, it's broken up pretty well. But with the guys missing to start the year and then the difficult stretch once those guys get back, this could be a team that maybe doesn't have a great record to start the year, but I'm probably not going to push the panic button unless I see like major concerns.
You've got the players that they're going to be missing. You'll have some players growing into newer roles as well, considering the older guys that have gone out the door. But yeah, the softer landing and just more evenly distributed matchups down the stretch make me think that this should still be a team that, could go somewhere 6, 7, 8 on the ladder and wouldn't surprise me at all. They started incredibly slowly in the preseason game they had against the Blues, and it just looks like such a Giants fantasy thing of looking at the higher ranking players because Whitfield, Callahan, Ash. Finn Callahan, by the way, no, the Saints did not pursue him with that ludicrous deal, but he has signed on for 4 more years for the Giants, and Connor Iden has signed on for 6 more. So there's stability there, and Callahan is a clear favorite of mine. I think I was on him a bit before you were. One of the better left-footed kicks in the league, really explosive player, accurate kick in addition to the distance. So wing to half forward flank, good option there early in the year when you're looking for more attacking solutions.
He's one of those guys that, similarly to Hayden Young, I really like because he kind of, he can stretch the field.
If his hamstrings are okay, then absolutely so. I'm still bitter about Brent Daniels missing out on the All-Australian team last year, so hopefully he can prove me incredibly right with that. 2 goals from Darcy Jones in his helmet were great to see. Toby Bedford in there too. I mean, this is a team that's going to have to look small, and I think that's the way the game is trending anyway. Unfortunately, though, they'll only be able to put in 2 Tobys to start the season. By the time rolls around, though, there's potential to see 3 Tobys, all with Ys, against a Toby IE, because Toby Travalia is a Saint.
How do we pronounce the last name of the guy they took with the 36th pick?
Ow. Damn it. We've gone over this before. Jack Ow.
I don't care. I'm calling him Jack Off.
He's received some good reviews. Cody Ango has shown well in intra-club, but maybe less so in the preseason outing so far. Maybe just a dearth of opportunities there. A lot of weight is going to be carried by that small group to start the season, as well as Callum Ward pushing up. This is going to be the last go-around for Callum Ward. His family's already going to be back in Victoria. There's a whole story about that. I have no reason to dislike this Giants team, though. Well, maybe with the exception of Stringer. Holy cow, I just realized who's also going to definitely be getting an opportunity early in the year, especially with Hogan out. You wonder why he's there, that he pops up when you least expect it. 34-year-old Lockie Keefe. You're looking tall, it's kind of got to be him. And I would honestly see Kingsley and company backing him in before Grishevsky, because it's that second ruck option too. Giants double ups other than the Swans. They've got Geelong, as we mentioned, the Expansion Cup, the Saints, one of which is West Coast, and the Bulldogs. And their Canberra games, as a reminder, the first of those is round 7 against the Bulldogs, then round 13 against Port, and round 22 against North. Canberra team 20.
How many different sites are these guys playing at this year?
Ah, boy, let's go through this. You ask me this every year.
They set the record for wins at different venues last year, didn't they?
Either last year or the year before, and I think it was last year. But this year they've got the Showground, the G, Launceston, Norwood, Adelaide, Monica, SCG, Geelong, Marvel, the Gabba, Optus, and Gold Coast. That's 12. Did they win at every venue they played at last year?
They won at the Gabba, right?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? They might not have won. They didn't win at the FCG, I think.
Oh, yeah. I guess they wouldn't have.
I mean, the Giants and the Suns are the teams to play at the most unique venues. And that's also what makes them so entertaining, is that we love seeing the game spread around into so many of these different spots. And the Giants are part of that. They don't do Ballarat this year, though.
Strange.
Both South teams are instead. Ease of travel, I guess. Did we talk about our sleepers?
I don't think we really did. This one was a little tough for me.
You did go Fonty. I knew you were mentioning him.
Yeah, they won a lot when he played and seemed like a pretty good pick. I thought Darcy Jones would be a little too easy.
Excuse me, what do we say?
And his helmet.
Fonty played technically 5 games last year and won them all. I say technically because he was an unused sub round 20 against Melbourne. My pick is one I've seen on the radar a fair amount this year. Played 4 games last year, but no full games. And that is Connor Stone. 6'2", they talk about him as a really good runner. So I could also see him getting some opportunities earlier on in the season with the players that they'll be missing. Even though the defense isn't hurt as badly, you still have Sam Taylor, Harry Himmelberg, Connor Iden back there. Himmelberg's been up and down these past couple years, but that's a group that you would back in more often than not. Sam Taylor has reliably been the best one-on-one defender in the league, and it's taken Joe Danaher to stop him, which feels so weird to say in 2025. Thanks, Joe.
Miss you, bud.
I thought Sam Taylor was older than 25. Damn.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did. How did you know that number, Ethan? Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters. Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed. It's so easy you can edit it while drunk. And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do. Best of all, it's completely free. Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Episode 225 of Americans Watching the Footy, finishing off our team-by-team home and away previews. I am Benjamin Castle at BenjaminHK01 for my personals.
I'm Ethan Castle at Castle Media on Twitter. And then Brian Harambe, the executive producer, seems to have finally calmed down a bit. He's just chilling on the bed. He is on Instagram exclusively at Cat Named Brian.
Now, I know he's not doing isometric exercise because he isn't in the windowsill.
Correct.
Why is there smoke coming out of your oven, Seymour?
Collectively, we are at Americans Footy, and I need to make sure I'm posting more memes on the Instagram as well because they will be abundant this year. So what do we have left? We got Coast Coast Swan, as opposed to Duck Duck Goose, or as they say in Minnesota, Duck Duck Gray Duck. And we're going with one of the ducks because we got Gold Coast up in slot number 16, or shall we say...
The mighty Sun.
How could I not? It's the Suns. We'll believe it when we see it. What we do see is a crowded halfback unit now. They already had it, and then Dan Rioli and John Noble came into the picture. John Noble, by the way, is going to be wearing number 2. That'll take some getting used to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Dan Rioli and John Noble, they don't quite play the exact same spot. Rioli plays a bit further back, but they do a lot of the same stuff. So I guess if there's something to be really interested in with this team, it's like, how do they plan to kind of just sort out the crowd in the back?
Rioli and Noble are both accelerators. I can see Rioli doing more of that inside and Noble out if you're trying to differentiate them. But what does this do to guys like Lachie Weller and Will Powell, for example? Powell's shown some ability to play further up the ground as well on the wings. So that's something that I've been expecting. Haven't seen as much this preseason, but I'd be on the watch for it.
Looked like Weller drew pretty good reviews from his preseason performances, though.
That's nice with how much of a struggle it's been for him to be on the Oval these past couple of years. Okay, I'm looking at the numbers on this Suns list, and there are a couple that throw me off.
Let's see. Yeah, John Noble.
You're going to see one right at the top.
Mac Andrew wearing 1. Oh, yeah, it's going to look funny.
Yeah, the number's about as thin as he is.
Yeah, that could actually be really funny just for that. I mean, I liked him as number 31. I thought he was a good 31.
Yeah, to me, it's all about differentiation, and it starts from the back. Mac Andrew could continue being that swing man because that's what Mac Andrew is. I mean, he ought to be. I mean, I'm thinking back to 3 goals and a dagger against Essendon. We'll have to keep those Gold Coast Essendon highlights on hold for some point later in the season.
There are enough pieces on this team that could break out that give you reason to be intrigued, whether that be Leo Lombard, who they are super high on coming out of their academy, whether that's my breakout pick, Bailey Humphrey, who's shown it in flashes. I'd love to see it more consistently.
Lombard, you've got that. What, 4 strong is it? Recruit group from the last year, Ethan Reed, Jake Rogers, Will Graham. Who am I missing in there?
Sam Closey.
Well, Closey had come back from a stint elsewhere. I forget if Johnston fit in there or not, Lloyd Johnston.
I like him. Was Closey the one who was racking up insane tackle numbers, or was that Graham?
That was Graham. No, Closey's the one who was the outside mid who could run for days. You were like, damn, if only his brother can be like this, because it's Sam Closey.
Yeah, I mean, I think Reed is really interesting as a big body. One of the things that kind of threw me off this year...
Jed Walter was the other, of course. I was looking for him, but he also changed his number to 4.
One of the other things that makes this team really interesting this year is that they might start phasing out Jared Witz and getting Ned Moyle in there more, which would just be no fault of Witz's, but kind of create an interesting point where there could be some friction or confusion.
I thought that even before the preseason game, and having my views confirmed, it makes even easier my decision to put Moyle as my focus player for the year. We know he's just a big dude in there. He's the type of guy who's just like, oh yeah, that's why he's wearing 49. And of course, now he's wearing 21.
I think there's reason to be interested in this Suns team, even if we expect them to do the same thing until they prove otherwise, like as a whole. The parts are interesting because it can get a sense of really what are they expecting this to look like when they're contending, even if they stay where they've been this year. You know, we'll get a sense of who's going to be a long-term piece, who could be trade bait. We're going to get a good idea of how the Suns evaluate their own players. And I think that keeps them kind of compelling, even if big picture, they still are what they are.
We are who we are.
They are who we thought they were.
It's hard for me to get excited about the Suns until they can really, like be in it round 23 or, go out and win some games on the road. Not at Geelong, please, but maybe some of the others.
Injury update for the Suns. Had they been playing this week, it would have been questions on Mac Andrew, Lockie Weller, and Charlie Ballard. Now you'd imagine they'd be all right for round 1, getting that extra time to recover. And that will be a coast clash to start their season the Sunday evening out west. Sam Flanders could potentially get back for that. And Flanders is one of the pieces that interests me the most because we saw him rack up all the possessions in halfback. But once Tuke Miller went out and he went into the middle, it's like, oh yeah, this is where you belong. It actually makes sense. So more of that from Stupid Sexy, please. And I wonder how urgent they might be to do that as well with, just Miller being on the older side and Matt Rowell having his contract up and the Cats and Dogs both being big players for him. The Dogs, by the way, I totally get because Libba's not going to last forever.
Looking at the schedule, I don't really see any super nasty stretch. I think this actually is broken up pretty friendly.
It is a bottom 6 schedule very clearly, and they do get Richmond and Melbourne twice, along with a Darwin double that could really soften the blow of their one meeting each against the Dogs and Hawks. Their other double-ups, by the way, Brisbane, of course, Adelaide, Essendon, and Greater Western Sydney, but I'm just thinking about the Darwin double and how advantageous that's been to them. I mean, they swept that all 3 years.
If there's a year for them to lose a game up there, it's this year. That would be a really tricky stretch of schedule if those games weren't in Darwin, because round 7, you host the Swans, round 8, you're at Brisbane, and then Dogs and Hawks. But again, those being in Darwin definitely help. Other than that, I'm looking at kind of the end of the season, save for the Richmond game, really starting, I guess, depending on how seriously you take Essendon round 17 when they play the Bombers at Marvel. Round 18, host Collingwood, at Adelaide round 19, host Q Clash round 20, host Richmond round 21, then at Carlton, host the Giants, at Port.
So not a soft landing by any means.
But with the easy stretch early in the season, it can be enough to, create some buzz around them. But again, they're going to have to do something that really changes my perception.
Snap back to reality, SOS.
How many times do the Suns play at the MCG this year?
1.
Yep, and it's round 3 against the D's. So, well, at least you get them before the skiing season really starts. But still, that's
If there's a game with an attendance below 15,000 at the G,
I think it'll still crack at least 17. Oh, also, GWS round 1 is their only game at the G.
and that's also against Melbourne.
That at least might get a bit of a bump because it's round 1. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but now I've got to look at how often each of the out-of-state teams, other than the Swans, go to the G. Let's see. All right, I'll make a note of West Coast for when we preview them. Crows get 3. Wow, Port only has 1? We previewed Port very early. Port's only scheduled trip to the G is round 1 against Collingwood. That's kind of shocking.
Straight up bad, I'm sorry.
They only have 2 games at Marvel, and then because they play the Hawks in Tasmania, they play the Dogs at Ballarat. They do go to Geelong, but wow, the Port will not be playing many games in Victoria this year altogether. I promise we'll talk more about the Suns, but I'm in on this now. I'll save the Eagles one for when we talk about them. And the Lions will get their share, being a bigger club and, the defending champs and all that.
They get 3.
Dockers get 2, round 6 against the D's and round 19 against Collingwood. Well, actually, Freo only has 5 games in Victoria because they go to Marvel twice, Geelong once, and the G twice.
Okay, 5 is the bare minimum.
Yeah, that still doesn't seem like a lot. Anyway, more Sun stuff. So, yeah, the schedule presents itself with a chance to go on and, start the year hot and be in the 8, and people go, oh my God, the Suns, it's happening. And then the tougher second half of the season sets itself up to be the same thing it's always been.
We'll believe change when we see it.
Yeah, but again, there is reason to at least watch this team. We'll get a sense, again, of what pieces do they value and which ones are kind of on the out there.
When will they stop being a year away from a year away?
It's got to happen soon. By next year, you have to actually be a year away.
Didn't we say that last year?
I think, but looking at their academy stuff and some of the guys they brought in, I don't know.
They've got another ridiculous academy class coming in, highlighted by Zeke Euland, brother of Bodie. One of the young defenders who impressed me most last year, who naturally flies under the radar because he's a Sun.
That's another one where it's how does he fit in with the Noble and Rioli additions? That's a tricky one.
I mean, he could just more easily be stay at home, focus on the one-on-one side, maybe have that first or second disposal after securing the intercept, but doesn't have to do as much of the run and carry. The overlap opportunities should be plentiful.
So again, my sleeper is Bailey Humphrey. I think this might be a make or break year for him. Benjamin's is Ned Moyle, and I think that's a really good one because I think there should be a lot of interest in what happens with the ruck duo. Because maybe a club that's looking for a guy ends up bringing in Jared Witz next year. Maybe he could end up in hoops even depending on Toby Conway's health and development.
I think we completely forgot about the other addition that the Suns made this year.
Their terrible new jumpers and logos.
I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about Elliot Himmelberg because I think he was the first player to move during the trade and free agency period. But yeah, that's another talking point. I kind of dig the pink. They could kind of lean into that sort of Vice vibe if they really wanted to, but so bland otherwise. Their clash is will the real Eagles please stand up. The home jumper is just
Everything's in red.
Yeah, I know.
and it's hard to tell what even the logo is supposed to be because it's not pronounced enough as an S. But also in the other merch where you do have the gold and blue accents, it's just oh, this could still be a brand. But no, you decided to just say red. You have now become the Swedish fish of the AFL.
So if it's not really a pronounced S, is it more with a lisp? Is it more of a F?
Oh no, my thought is Oakley having trouble printing their logo.
That's been referenced.
Which AFL player is most likely to take an Oakley driver's seat selfie now that Reese Matheson is retired?
Damn, that was just what I was going to say. All right, so for now, are they the Gold Coast Thunth?
You're sounding like me when I was 6.
I know, but they're the Thunth. because it's not really well pronounced.
They might be the Thunth. 2 teams to go, traditional rivals with a clear link between them now. And we're flying technically high, but not really in terms of the ladder.
I mean, I would think if we're flying from Gold Coast to Perth, your cruising altitude probably would be decently high. It's a lengthy flight.
But have you heard the news?
This is a reference to something.
No, it's not.
What is it?
The song is dead. Long live the song.
New Eagles song?
New old Eagles song. Goodbye, Birds of Tokyo.
That is significant. Is there like a video version or something?
Just the song they used before.
Darn, I liked the original one.
Like the one where they actually won this year. Who was that against? God.
It was a throwback game.
That wasn't Richmond. That wasn't Melbourne, which meant it was against Gold Coast.
Funny that they wore throwbacks against a super new club like that.
Yeah, that was the game with Liam Duggan Heroics.
Was that a Friday game?
Yes, it was. I remember this extremely vividly. This was up against a Bulldogs and Melbourne game that was an absolute blowout. And so most people's attention went to that Eagles-Suns game. And that was also, I think, the night after I'd finished my summer term. So I was up in this totally delirious state watching that game at 3:30 a.m. Then hopped onto the back chat stuff. I think Dan Const and a couple others saying, oh, there's no way you're actually there in San Diego. About 36 hours later, I was at a San Diego Padres game, taking a photo with USD coaches in West Coast Eagles garb.
It's like, you must be a West Coast Eagles fan in San Diego if you think we're fucking.
Had some time to view what the Eagles did in that surprisingly intense community series game against North. I think that was intense because there was actually kind of something worth playing for in terms of pride and just, it wasn't just trotting out the young guys and trying something new. It was, all right, we think we have a blueprint. This team thinks they do too. Let's actually go out and try some things. And whereas Bo Allen kind of was all over the place, overall, things were decent and the Eagles did end up winning that game. It felt hollow with North kicking 9-15. But hopefully that game is a sign of things to come in terms of North losing a game at Bunbury, because they'll be running that back after North's bye. The typical guys stepped up in typical spots, Brady Hoff in the normal places, because Brady Hoff, you will know I am the Brady Hoff enjoyer, and I'm heavily considering getting a number 19 Eagles jumper. Great to see Liam Baker in action, of course. 2 goals for flying Liam Ryan on just 8 touches. 4 on 8 touches for Jake Waterman. Oh, that was nice.
If you could get both Waterman and Allen healthy, you could have, again, some pretty fun offensive upside.
Or Maine does one take away from the other, and Allen is definitely chasing some bigger money this year, and Brisbane may come calling. So be good, Oscar, but maybe don't be too good.
My hope for the Eagles this year is that, I don't care if you win more than another, 5 to 7 games, but I'd like the losses to be more competitive. Because last year, other than a stretch in the middle of the season, a lot of the losses were not very competitive. And that's what I would like to change. I'd like to see, more games that are within 4-ish goals.
They had just 4 losses within 4 goals last year. Essendon was one that got away round 8.
But it was fun.
Saints round 12. The completely frustrating North loss round 13. And the Lions lost by 13, which was kind of a statement after Simpson had parted ways. And nice to see Adam Simpson on TV, by the way. Would love for him to actually be a bit more expressive, but newer voices on there from more recent coaches, I think, is a good thing. So keep that up, Sino. And any broadcast with Adam Papalia on it, I will listen to because he is excellent. It felt so good that the first footy I listened and watched this season was Papalia calling the Indigenous All-Stars game. The smaller side for the Eagles, I think, will be more encouraging this year for 2 reasons. One of them is a guy that looked like Baby.
Noah Long?
Yes, of course. I'm surprised you hadn't mentioned it yet. It's good to have him back. As I said, for a year plus now, there's a reason this guy was given number 13 by Luke Shuey himself. And the other one who's looked very with it so far this season is Tyler Brockman. Remember his whole deal last year with a drunk driving incident, but has been in tune with things through the scratch match against Richmond and this one against North. Let's see if he can scale it up against bigger opponents. So Brockman, Ryan, Long, something or other has to work there, I think. Structurally in other places, Jack Hutchinson getting more time is good. Want to see what he can do out on the wing more reliably, because the center is going to be a bit more solid with Jack Graham supporting Harley Reid on the more mature side, even with Elliot Yeo out, because Elliot Yeo and also Elijah Hewitt healthy, back in. Whoa, you okay?
Yeah, sorry. Just grab my phone.
He ought to be back in main training this week and could feature very quickly. So adults in the room and in the right spaces, I think. Like, I wouldn't mind if Jamie Cripps is there as a mentor figure, but doesn't have to play every week to open up opportunities for some of the younger people in there. You know, I forgot Matt Oey's also on the smaller side too. I cannot believe what they had to pay to get him, but Matt Oey's is there. But it's time to phase out more of those premiership pieces, obviously. Make it gentle with Jamie Cripps. Make it gentle-ish with Tom Cole. The growing pains will definitely be those main key defense spots, because Jerry McGovern will miss time this year in all likelihood with a hamstring. It's just a McGovern thing. And Harry Edwards will take the spotlight this year otherwise, now that Barris is gone. So I've been wanting Edwards to get this opportunity. It's now here. Make the most of it, kid. Have fun going up against Ben King and Jed Walter round 1. It's not an easy start, I'll say that. After hosting Gold Coast, it's at Brisbane and the Home Derby before going to the showground and facing the Blues in.
Gather round.
So it may be a struggle to start things out. It'll be a real feeling out period. New coach as well, of course, and Andrew McQualter.
It doesn't slow that much easier the following couple weeks either. You know, you host Essendon, that's always a pretty high intensity game, and then you play the Hawks at Marvel. Other stretch that looks not great, bookending the bye with Carlton at home, at Collingwood, home against GWS, and at Port. But I mean, it is still very much a bottom 6 schedule.
It's still a bottom 6 fixture, sure. Only one top 6 finisher last year for the double ups, and that is the Giants. But you've also got Carlton Trio, of course, who I still can't believe they missed out, along with Adelaide, Melbourne, and Richmond. Well, you beat 3 of those teams last year.
Adelaide's a tough one, especially just because you have to go play them on the road. I mean, we'll see, how much more can this team do this year with holding serve at home and maybe stealing a couple away? It's going to be weird that they only play North once, especially after how fun those games actually were last year.
And where is that North game?
Mr. Hands.
We mentioned it last time. It was a Bunbury preview that we already had. The lesser known quantities will be some of those younger guys. Hopefully Archer Reed has opportunities early at forward. To get him a permanent spot for now may be difficult to get him a permanent spot right now may be difficult, because you've got to make sure both Waterman and Allen have their space. But start growing Archer into things. Ryan Merrick showed good things on the wing as well. And Ruben Jinby, I was surprised at how comfortable he became at halfback flank last year. I thought he was going to be one of those guys in the guts, but I ended up being more at peace with it because I saw the list makeup and realized that with Hewitt coming back, it might not have been as pressing a need as some were making it out to be. Now, Ethan, I talked a lot already. What are your list thoughts, and where does your sleeper lie?
I want to see who steps up defensively and who can become that second tier of midfielders behind Tim Kelly and, if he's ever healthy, Elliot Yeo. My sleeper actually could be one of those guys in Ryan Merrick, who I thought elevated his role nicely after being a mid-season draftee. I'd hoped Jai Coley would have done that a couple years ago. Injuries got in the way, whereas Merrick had his
first full season last year and looked solid. Now I'd like to see if he can really take that next step. Played, I believe looks like 19 games last year. How many can he get in this year? And can he really elevate his role further to be like a mainstay and maybe one of the bigger mid-season draft successes?
And it's going to be tough to get past what Jai Newcomb's done, but sure, that's a lofty goal. I'll be looking for Clay Hall in that respect to have that midfield time, as well as one of the newer pieces in Luca Grego, who's come over from Victoria from the Western Jets, which is a club that's produced a strong number of midfields and which is a club that's produced a strong number of midfielders in recent times. My highlight player, though, is Tyrell Dewar, and I had that as mine even before preseason game. With the new crowd in at small forward, Dewar's going to have to diversify his game a little bit. He does have the running capacity, though, and is more powerful than his frame might let on. So maybe you could see him getting a bit more of an inside opportunity. 185 centimeters would put him right around 6 feet, I believe. Yeah, 6'1". So nothing overwhelming in size, but I mean, bigger than Noah Long. And he does seem to be above guys like Hall and some of the other youngsters in the pecking order already. So you go, Tyrell.
So from what I read in that community series game, he only really played like the fourth quarter, but looked really good.
Yeah, one of the guys that helped secure the game for them. And that was part of the encouragement there. A good impact, even without scoring a goal. Do I expect this team to get out of the bottom three? No, I do not.
I could see a path to it if Melbourne or the Crows or Saints or someone really fall flat on their faces.
We expect that of the Saints, and then they totally surprise us. And again...
Oh, no, I don't expect that of the Saints. I expect the Saints to stay, around like 10th-ish with room to go up or down a couple spots. But I'm saying, like, this is how it could happen. Not that it will.
And it wouldn't be an outcome that I totally mind for the Eagles for the season, because we know they're in that build mode and that they'll still have a decent draft hand for next year. I mean, the biggest thing to prey on is Hawthorne's downfall, but that's unlikely.
I mean, you should be preying on Hawthorne's downfall regardless of their draft pick situation.
I mean, it does help that the Eagles have their first three.
How many times do the Eagles play at the G this year?
1 against Richmond.
Yep, round 9. All right, I guess as is tradition, even though we know exactly where it's going, we're going to spin the wheel one last time.
Yeah, I made it nice and pretty. Have an 8-part wheel, and it's landed on one of the red and white pieces rather than a white and red piece.
That reminds me of the interior's beigeish tan, and I wanted tannish beige.
I want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but the jelly's on the top.
Swans, first off, getting hit hard with injuries. New coach, premiership loss hangover. Going to be an interesting season for them.
How about Callum Mills with his plantar fascia? How about Errol Golden breaking his ankle?
Dean Cox is now your head coach. If you showed me a photo of him, you could probably ask, what sport did this guy win a gold medal in for Yugoslavia?
The answer would be weightlifting?
Weightlifting or maybe basketball. So all I can think of, even though they were Soviet, not Yugoslav, is the Latvian shoes from Family Guy, Teslik.
Running, throwing, lifting big things. Teslik. That's all right with me, man.
Water polo's the other option. Water polo guys are just massive beings. I mean, just having gone to Cal, which is a program that regularly wins water polo national championships and gets Olympic quality players from Central and Eastern Europe. You see those guys just I want you as part of my entourage. And Dean Cox kind of looks like that. He looks more Croatian than Mirko Krokop.
I mean, the pieces that are healthy are still very good. You still have Chad Warder. You still have Isaac Heaney. You still have the eternally underrated James Rowbottom. You still have another underrated guy in Justin McInerney.
All right, is Rowbottom underrated, or is this reputation as just a tackle racker kind of warranted, honestly, with a bit of his disappearance at the finals?
No, I think he's still underrated, but I think there are also some legitimate fears about this team. The biggest one being, what's the defense going to be like, especially if Tom McCartan ends up playing forward?
Was that a conversation with Coach Donnie Hess about it? Donnie's disposal, commissioner of our fantasy league, head coach of the Des Moines Roosters, and he thinks that is very much a stopgap solution to have McCartan up forward. I am not so sure about that.
I just think it's solving one problem and creating another. I think you have more than enough forward options. I mean, unless you're really expecting Lewis Melican to do like two people's jobs.
And keep his hamstrings intact while at it.
Yeah, it's not like you're taking McCartan out of a position of strength. That's why I don't like it.
Maybe this is really the opportunity for Joel Hamling to rise up then, even though he was cast forward last year in the twos.
He's also listed as a forward on their actual list now.
Which just makes things even more bizarre. I mean, we haven't been hearing anything about Patrick Snell or anybody in that respect, so the jury is most definitely out. And if you come back with a verdict of Aaron Francis, I might lock you up.
I mean, Ben Patton is on the smaller side and not a super huge impact. Now, of course, you could solve a lot of these problems by just never letting the ball enter the defensive 50 if your midfield's that good. You know, that's one solution, but not having Errol Golden for the foreseeable future really doesn't help with that.
A lot of opportunities there. Corey Warner is one that I want to highlight. He was my sleeper pick before this even happened, and he also just signed a 2-year extension, so maybe that could go along with Chad signing on for a couple years more as a stopgap to free agency. That has most definitely been discussed. So opportunity for Corey as an outside piece. I am a huge Braden Campbell supporter, and he's been playing half forward flank quite well, so I'm not sure if you'd move him there, but definitely expect a more prominent role from Campbell. A smaller player with just a great motor and one of the most accurate long kicks in the competition. If there's ever a year for him to take things to a grade A level, this feels like the year for Campbell to do that. What also would really help, how about a healthy year out of Justin McInerney? If you have him playing a bit further up the ground, then maybe that's another place where Golden's absence could be a bit tempered. I mean, I've got faith in a lot of the smaller players, a lot of the movers. Matt Roberts took a step up last year as a mobile defender with decent pressure abilities as well. Jake Lloyd has also been playing on the wing, so if you want a more seasoned option in there right away, Lloyd could be your bet, and we're going to find that out very quickly.
And just the whole McCartney thing just leads me to ask, like, for example, round 4 when you're playing against North, who's going to stop Nick Larkey? Yeah, this team could, and I've said this in past years, but I feel stronger about it now. This team could have some real defensive holes. Like, I don't have concern with ball-moving defenders. I have concern with just getting lit up by opposing forwards. I think even with all the injuries and stuff, they could be really sharp in other areas.
I'm not going to question their depth in about the middle 60% of the ground. And I've been talking about the depth guys most of the way there. Guys that probably are not on a lot of people's radars right away. But you want to talk about the players that ought to be there. Questions about Ollie Florence's ability going through the season, where exactly he'll play, how high up he does.
Maybe he takes up some of the spot that Errol Golden was on. You know, you kind of can push Florent a little further forward.
Be more expected of Lloyd to do that.
Yeah, I would like to see Florent do more of that because I think he can be a pretty dynamic player.
But also his body type could lend you a bit more help there in defense early on. And then forward, obviously, there's no lack of small to mid-sized scoring threats. You can talk about the talls, but in a game that's moving more and more toward the well, those smalls, Will Hayward is a really gutsy player, honestly, and has come to be one of my favorites. You think back to that round 19 game against the Brisbane Lions, where he was battling through injury to get key possessions and tackles and a goal there. The Lions won that game, I think, by 2 points, but that was almost the Will Hayward game. You got Hayward and Papley both barging in and strong possession players as well. I don't think Papley's actual possession game is valued enough because the only thing most people think about is, oh, gee, Tommy Papley loves a goal.
He loves a celebration.
Looking at the tall side, Brody Grundy suffered a knock, but at this point, I would say is more likely to play than not. We'll see if that holds. And Joel Amarty, that'll be quite a test for you going up against that new look Hawthorne back line. Sorry, you don't get to play Adelaide every single week.
I think I've said this about Joel Amarty for a while. I want to see him have more decent games because it seems like every game for him is either great or invisible. I'd just like to see him have a few more, 2-goal, 11 disposal games. While we're on the topic of his 9-goal game, though, I do want to mention this because I had hinted at it last year a couple times, and in case we have new listeners, since, 100 goals in the season or 1,000 in a career seems so unlikely, what about invading the Oval for a player getting 10 goals in a game? I think that would be appropriate.
Gets people to stick around through the end of blowouts, too.
Yeah, I actually really like that idea. Because, 10-goal games are pretty rare at this point.
We didn't have any last year. It took the 2023 Eagles for the last ones to happen.
That was Curnow?
And Tex. With your concerns about the talls, though, on both ends, does your sleeper fall into that category or do you go elsewhere? Again, mine is Corey Warner.
Mine is a Nepo Baby pick.
Nepo Baby? There aren't any father-sons on here. There are a decent number of academy guys, obviously, but Nick Blakey's established. And Isaac Heaney, of course, is an academy guy, and what a season he had last year. A fall-off could be expected, but this is a team that has enough moving targets, I think, that Heaney doesn't have to take a starring role, even with Errol out to start the year. But I don't see a Nepo Baby in here.
Through siblings.
Oh, Riak Andrew.
Yes. 6'4". He's not as tall as Mac, but just another member of that family. If he's even like a super watered down version of Mac, I'm all in. And he's a tall defender, which this team could probably use.
The irony in that Melbourne did not match a bid on him when they weren't able to bid on Mac because of the changing rules. Also, as we're going through this Swans list, I want to mention the fucking idiocy of one Caden Cleary. Do you remember this, Ethan?
I know he got caught doing something. I know he did a drugs.
It's not just that he did a drugs. It's that he straight up hid it from the club.
So take me through the situation again. Remind me the whole deal.
He was cited by New South Wales police for possessing an illicit substance, and the club didn't even know about it. He ended up being suspended 2 games by the league right around that same time. But the fact that he couldn't even be transparent to his own club about it, where you're in a place where you could get all the resources you need in terms of fighting drug habits and that sort of thing.
Yeah, if I'm the Swans, I'm more upset that he didn't say anything about it. Like, I get if you're embarrassed, but
if I were there at the Swans, I would have seen that 2-game suspension and gone, that's 5 games now.
I would have just doubled it to 4. But yeah, it's not that you did it, it's that you didn't tell us. Because if you do something like that and you tell the club, they're just like, all right, we'll deal with it. You shouldn't have done it, but we'll deal with it. Don't do it again.
You will be suspended in all likelihood, but we have the avenues to help you. Thanks for coming to us right away. But this is months after, I believe.
Yeah, that's just dumb.
And this is a guy that I really had on my radar too. Another one of their academy guys had some time at the end of last year with Luke Parker gone, had the ability to step up into a half-forward spot. Now there's clearly trust lost there. So get a grip. First 3 games ought to be entertaining for the Swans, hosting the Hawks and Lions, and then at Freo. Interesting meetings with them last year. Obviously, Cam McCarthy's death overshadowed the meeting out west last year where the Dockers played well aside from right in front of goal. And then, obviously, the Logan McDonald miss after the siren in the return fixture.
Outside of going to North round 4, this early schedule could be really tough altogether.
You got Collingwood in before you host Portland. Who the hell knows what direction that goes? At Gold Coast is interesting because it's at Gold Coast.
It's funny because the Swans have played well up there in recent years, but I still always look at that with a sense of trepidation.
If anything, it would be a home Gold Coast meeting that has me more concerned, but they dodged that this year.
Then you host the Giants. You play. Weird that they play Essendon at Marvel. That could be close to full. That's usually an MCG game.
Maybe they're looking for some games to fill up Marvel then. Just last year, I think it was an Essendon Bulldogs game where they finally had something that cracked 50,000 there again.
Round 10, hosting Carlton. They've done very well in recent years.
That's traditional for Martin Crook.
Yeah. The other stretch I think is tricky. Rounds 15 through 17 out of the bye. At Port, home against the Dogs, home against Freo.
Don't sleep on round 18. I did last year for round 17. It's the Saints.
And then rounds 20 through 23 at GWS, home against Essendon, at Brisbane, home against Geelong. And then round 24 is Eagles away, which, in the last couple of years they've had no trouble with them, but still worth keeping an eye out for.
It ought to be a soft close for them, but who the fuck knows?
I'm definitely less high on this team than I was last year, and it's very little because of list changes and much more just because of circumstances between coming off a grand final loss and injuries. Like losing Luke Parker isn't enormous. It's not great, but it's not enormous. It's just, I think everything fell into place last year and they didn't take advantage. And I think there could definitely be a hangover effect this year.
Double ups for the Swans as a reminder. Of course, the Giants for the Derbies. Also, Brisbane, you tend to have the grand finalists double up. Essendon, Freo, North, that seems to be an odd one out, and Port.
Outside of North, that is tough. And what I do like about the North one is I think that's one of the best looking matchups.
Oh, I think that is straight up the best looking matchup in the league. Sydney hosting North.
Yeah, I don't like it as much, again, with the South Melbourne look. I think they should only do that at the G. Don't do that at Marvel. Do it like once or twice a year, not all the time.
There'll even be games this year where there is a club that's going to be wearing mostly red. They're going to be going to the black shorts.
I hope it's just for like a color clash thing and not more often, because I don't love that look.
It doesn't say cheer, cheer the red, black, and white.
Now, if they do the Black Swan, that I'd be all in on.
The Black Swans should have never gone away. And I'm looking forward to seeing those specialty junkers arrive. The Sir Doug Nicholls ones. There tend to be some decent designs for the Anzac rounds as well, if they aren't too over the top. And we'll definitely be looking at the aesthetic side for sure. Those will be highlights on multiple socials for us at Americans Footy on Twitter and Instagram. Because, that's our home and away previews, folks. And in not too long from now, we'll be previewing the 2 games of opening round. Please kill opening round after this.
Okay, real quick, let's throw in a couple predictions. And since we'll put them at the end here, they'll be easy to access. Let's see. Brownlow, you can't pick Nick Dacos or a former or someone who's already won it.
And you're taking Jai Newcomb.
Correct.
And I'm taking Matt Rowell then. Noah Anderson could take some votes off him, but I think Rowell could win the battles more often than not. It'll be really funny if that happens, and then it's clear he's going to go elsewhere. Coleman medal, we probably can't pick a former winner here.
Coleman is tough because, for one, Charlie Curnow and Jesse Hogan are missing some time to start the year.
Which makes Jeremy Cameron an easy pick.
Yeah, but he always starts the season hot and then cools off a bit. Trying to get someone who's just going to be like the obvious target on their team.
I feel less of that with Josh Tracy this year because of Amos and Jackson starting forward, but a Cyclone's already messed up opening round. What if it just messes up the entire league?
Who do you feel better about, Oscar Allen or Jake Waterman?
Waterman, easily.
All right, then. I kind of like the idea of him winning it, or maybe Nick Larkey.
Larkey, that makes a lot more sense to me than an Eagle. Grand final pick, Ethan, go for it.
God, this is... I'm struggling with this because nobody really stands out. I see a lot of teams towards the top that I like, but don't love. Let's go... I'm going to hate this, but...
Are you going to say Hawthorn defeats Brisbane?
No, I'm going to go GWS over Hawthorn, maybe? Sure, we'll go GWS over Hawthorn.
Fuck it, Hawthorne over Geelong, 2008, baby.
Ooh, we need to each pick a draw.
Let's pick the draw now before we start our round previews.
I have this not fun feeling that we may not have a draw this year.
But we must pick one.
Yeah, I'm worried we're not going to have a draw. But if we're going to go with one, let's go North against Freo, the North home game at Optus. Why not? I get the feeling North is going to play in a draw this year, so let's go with that one.
And their last meeting at Optus was a pretty crazy one too. I don't know, I was wanting to go with whatever Gold Coast and Essendon is made up at People First, but now that feels like a cop-out.
No, it doesn't. Why not?
Sure, let's go real sickos. The makeup of Gold Coast Essendon.
You know what? Fine, go with a non-makeup game as well.
Round 20, St. Kilda versus Melbourne. And that is the most important prediction of all. As a reminder, I am individually at Benjamin HK01. He is at Castle Media.
Brian Harambe is sleeping next to me, but I'm about to brush him, so he'll probably wake up and be grumpy. He is on Instagram at catnameDryan.
Yeah, good time of day.